Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily, a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, and I use AI as a thinking partner, preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So several weeks ago, I did an episode on AI slop. That's the mass-produced, low-quality AI videos that are flooding the internet, including flooding children's media. And these are things like car safety content with the wrong information, alphabet videos where letters don't match sounds. The problem with AI slop, for the most part, is carelessness. Nobody's really taking care of what's being produced. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, not AI content that's careless, but AI content that's designed to deceive. Specifically, AI-generated images made to look real. And a new study that asks a question I hadn't seen asked before: when students try to spot a fake image, where do their eyes actually go? So the study is from a team of researchers in Germany, published in April in the journal Computers in Education. And the lead author is Weigelt. And the question they were trying to answer is this: does critical thinking instruction actually change how students examine AI-generated images? And if so, how? So to find out, they used eye tracking technology. Students were shown a series of portrait images, some real photographs, some AI-generated fakes, and the technology measured where students were looking, for how long, and how their gaze moved across each image. One group of students had received instruction in critical thinking about AI imagery before the task, and the other group had not. Then both groups were asked to identify which images were deepfakes. The trained students looked longer overall. They didn't just glance at an image and make a call, they spent more time with it. And they distributed their attention more broadly. Rather than fixating on the face and making a judgment, they scanned the edges, the background, the hair, the hands. These are all the places where AI generation tends to break down. And they did better. The training had an impact on the quality of their visual inspection of the images. That's the good news for AI literacy. The finding that I think is most interesting for teachers is this: both groups, the trained and the untrained, overestimated how accurate they were. When students were asked to rate their own confidence, they thought they were better at spotting fakes than they actually were. The trained students were more accurate in practice, but they were also overconfident about that accuracy. The gap matters, I think, because confidence without calibration is its own problem, especially when students are going from a controlled research task, like looking at portrait images in a study, to the actual media environment they live in. The images they'll encounter are more varied, more polished, and they're going to encounter them while scrolling quickly, not while sitting and concentrating as part of a study. The study also points to something that researchers call pattern recognition approach versus a systemic scan. Untrained students tend to rely on their gut. Something felt off or it didn't. Trained students were more likely to move through an image methodically, checking multiple areas before deciding. It's a learned behavior that doesn't come naturally, especially with a generation of students who've grown up scrolling. Now, what the study doesn't answer, and the researchers are pretty upfront about this, is whether the training holds over time. Do students keep using those scanning habits a week later, a month later, when they're tired, distracted, or in a context when they're not expecting to be deceived? That question remains open. There's something worth pausing on here that isn't just about AI literacy. It's about how we've been trained to consume images. Most of us look at photographs the way we look at faces in a conversation. We go to the center, we read the expression, we form an impression quickly. That's not generally a bad habit. That's how humans recognize people and situations fast and make judgments. But AI-generated imagery tends to fail at the edges of this, both literally and figuratively. The face in the center of the deepfake portrait can look completely convincing. The ears might not match, though. The hair near the jawline might have a strange texture. The photograph might blur in a way that doesn't follow any real physics of light. Training students to slow down and look at the periphery, not just the center, is a direct counter to how most people naturally look at images. It's asking them to override a fast, efficient cognitive habit with a slower, more deliberate one. That's a difficult practice to master. It requires a lot of practice, and it requires a reason, a motivation to do it. And I think that's the important piece where teachers come in. The study shows that instruction changed the pattern of eye movement. It changed where students looked. That's not for nothing. That's teaching people to see differently. Seeing differently takes repetition, not a single lesson. And you have to be motivated, find a deeper purpose to want to do this over time and outside the bounds of a study. If there's a practical takeaway from the research, I think it's this: don't treat deepfake literacy as a one-off media literacy activity. The habit the study is trying to build, that is to say, slowing down, scanning broadly, looking for inconsistencies, is a practice. It's not a fact that you're going to learn and retain. Also want to come back to the overconfidence piece because I think that's actually the most useful thing a teacher can take from this study. When students feel more capable, they tend to stop checking. If a student comes away from a deepfake literacy lesson feeling like they can spot a fake, they may actually be less careful in practice, not more. There's a version of this lesson that might go, here's how AI-generated images fail, here are the tells, now you're equipped. And students leave feeling competent. It's satisfying in the moment, but the study suggests it's not quite right. A more accurate framing, and the harder one, I think, is training helps, but trained observers still get fooled. The images that exist today are not the hardest images you'll encounter. Skepticism isn't a skill you develop once and have forever. It's a practice you need to repeat. That's a less triumphant tone to sound, but I think it's a truer one, especially given the rapid pace with which deepfake technology is evolving. And the overconfidence finding that gives teachers a concrete way to make the point, not as discouragement, but as calibration, let's say. Knowing the limits of your own accuracy is itself a form of critical thinking. The reason I want to spend a full episode on this is that it's doing something different from most AI literacy research. It's not asking whether students believe AI-generated content or what policies schools should adopt. It's looking at what students actually do with their eyes when they're trying to evaluate an image and asking whether that behavior can be changed. The answer from the study is yes, but partially and with training, and with the understanding that the training is the beginning of a practice, not the end of one. Feels more like the frame for teachers is not, here's the AI literacy unit, now students are prepared. It's more, here's how we start building a habit of attention, and here's why we need to keep at it. Again, the motivation and the reasoning for why students will want to do this falls to the teacher. I'd love to hear from all of you teachers how this lands in your classroom. Have you done any work around helping students evaluate AI-generated images? What did you notice about how students actually look at the images when they're trying to decide if something is real? And has the overconfidence piece, students thinking they're better than they are, come up in your experience? Please leave a comment. Love to hear from you. And as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on AI in the Classroom Daily.